Thanks, Miguel. So today we're going to be talking about how to make tutoring more interesting for both you and your tutor, and you and the student. And we're calling this Engaging Your Reader, an exploration of commonlit.org. So Common Lit is a free website, and we're going to start by talking about some of the website basics. I know we have a couple people on here who use Common Lit or who have used it a little bit. We're going to talk about how to use it in individual or small group tutoring, how you might use it as supplementary reading for homework. And I'm not really going to talk about creating classes or assigning students to those classes. That will be available in the slideshow. I can answer some questions about it. I don't know that that's the way that anybody would be likely to use it here. The reasons for using it, I mean, it works to use a classroom, works well if you have a large class. Then you can see if people are doing things. If you're working with a small group or one-on-one, you're mostly doing all of this together, talking through it. So using it in that fashion is probably not so important to you. So the plan is to go through my PowerPoint first and then go out and look at the website together. At that point in time, feel free to ask any questions, but let's just sort of run through what I've got. You'll have this so you can refer to it later in case you need to refresh your memory on some of this, because sometimes it gets confusing. So what is Common Lit? It's a free-to-use library of leveled short texts and articles. Each text contains several multiple choice questions that are embedded in the text, and we'll take a look at them. Some texts have additional text linked to them or video resources that can add to the content. There is the shared organization page if that's useful to you to organize your resources so they're easy to find. We have a common login that you are welcome to use. It's username tutors@literacypittsburgh.org. The password is LPTutor2023. The benefit to using that to you is that if you use it, you'll create your own class and you have your own students. But you won't get the emails. It's just the difficulty of creating your own login is that you have to interact with commonlit.org to answer some questions so they know you're a real person working for a real organization. If you use our login, all of that's done. Notice that this says, so this is what the landing page looks like. And it says, welcome Katie, because Katie's our education specialist. We signed up in her name. On this, you see the library, a place where you can browse for titles. Next to it, we've got classes. These are the only two that were on there when I took pictures. Sue had created a class for her student. I created several classes and put myself in them in several different ways. You can always create a student account if that's helpful to you, but it isn't really necessary. So as I got to thinking about this yesterday, I hadn't thought about how I'm going to choose, how to explain to you how to choose something to pick, how to choose a level, how to choose something that your student might be interested in. If your student is an adult basic ed student, we have a reading level on them. If your student is an ESL level, we may not know what level they're reading at. In which case, start with a poem at a 3rd grade level. That is the lowest level that exists in Common Lit. And or start with a text on something that's familiar to the student. Both of those will make the text more accessible to the student. So let's go take a look at browsing the library. This is what happens when we click on browsing the library. We see various ways to filter what shows up by grades, genres, content type. I would ignore standards unless you're really into that nitty-gritty sort of thing. So we're going to look first as how to share this with students, not assigning it as independent reading, because this is how I would use it with a group even. I would pick an article. This is one that caught my eye earlier when I was browsing. It didn't show on that first screen, but it's there. And this is what happens when you click on a particular topic. You get the text, a picture, some information. We're going to take a look at all of these different pieces, hopefully. Okay, so the first buttons that we see are up here. I've enlarged them just in case they're difficult to read. The text is pretty obvious. That's the thing you're reading now. There are paired texts, related media. The answer key is for the some assigned questions that are for after the reading. And there's a little piece that's a parent guide. This would be something you are unlikely to use. It just is something teachers can send home to parents to tell them this is what we're reading in class. All right, next. At the top, right under that, we see some other choices. We're going to talk about the assign choice, the assign button later. But next to it is a way for you to download the PDF of the text itself, which you might want to do if you're going to meet in person and want to hand this out to students. I still would prefer to do it digitally if I'm meeting with somebody, and I'll show you why. You can favorite it. That would make it a favorite, I think, to everybody who uses this site within our organization, but I'm not 100% sure. You can share it. We'll come back to that. And then you can preview it to look at it the way the student would see it. We'll take a look at some of that in a minute. On the right-hand side, we have activities. We have the teacher overview. One of the things one of my tutors says she likes is that it tells her how many pages are in the text. So that's helpful in deciding how long it's going to take, for one thing. The guiding questions, these are the questions that pop in or that a student can access as they're reading through the story. The assessment questions are the ones at the end of the text, which are not answered on the screen. For those answers, you do have to go to the answer key. And then there's some discussion information that will be likely to be useful to you as background information. Students also have these options showing up on their screen as you do. You can have it read aloud. It sounds wooden, so I would probably not choose to do that very often, but a student might find it useful to hear some of this again. Students can annotate on their own screen. Again, this is not something you would do with a group. I don't think it's an active function for when you're sharing your screen with students. You can also have it translate pieces of the text if you really need it to. I would say that for sort of really difficult words or concepts that your student is really struggling with. It's far better to try to get them to think in English itself than to work between the two languages. And you'll see why. I think the questions are challenging questions. Okay, sorry, I skipped ahead. Okay, so this is what you'd see as a student preview. A student's view would include anything above this line, or I'm sorry, below this line. They can have the story read aloud. They can add annotations. They can translate pieces. Under activities, you'll see that the teacher has turned on guided reading mode for this assignment. So we're going to scroll down a little further in this text, and you'll see with guided reading on, they can only read up to Q1. At Q1, they're going to click on Q1, and then they're going to have the ability to read the first question. Anything below Q1 is still grayed out. We really want to focus their attention on what this first question is going to be on. So let's take a look at it. Okay, the first question says, the speaker feels and gives them choices. They have basically unlimited number of times to try this out. It will, every time it will say, this is correct or this is incorrect. If it's incorrect, it will give them the chance to answer with another answer. It's really asking the student to think a lot about the text. This isn't a really simple question. Feelings don't come across very easily in something like this. And I don't know how it would work for someone to read the text in a foreign language and then try to answer this question. I also am not sure if the questions are translated. Kathy, do you have any experience with that?
Using the questions?
Yeah. Are the questions translated?
Well, I've never used the translation feature.
Okay.
So we always just read the text and do the questions in English.
Okay, good. That's what I would prefer you do anyway. I just wondered because I know that there are some challenges with some of the vocabulary. That's fine. That's something we can check out later. If there's vocabulary that the publishers think is likely to be troublesome, they put a footnote next to it, and those words are then defined at the bottom of the text. Or I found out the other day, you can click on that box with a number in it and we'll take you right to it. Always something new to learn. So the point of these guiding questions is really to help the student think. And you're not always going to feel comfortable answering these questions yourself. Sometimes it's going to be a stretch for you. I would urge you to discuss the questions and the answers with the students until you both feel fairly comfortable with the answer that Common Lit marks correct, or at least you can understand why it was chosen. Also, asking the question, what do you see in the text that supports the answer you chose, can help students think more critically about what answer they're choosing in those questions. Okay, let's see. So at the end of reading the text, you would choose the assessment questions or have the student choose the assessment questions. Again, the answers are not here. It's still a multiple choice question. This tells you there are 5 questions. After you choose an answer, you click next and it just goes to the next question. These over here on the right refer to the standards for the Common Core guidelines that started in the elementary schools and now they exist for adults as well. These are at the 9th and 10th grade level. So you can see this is a fairly complex poem that I would not choose for a beginning or a lower level ESL student. Although you would be surprised at what some English language learners can read, even though they can't talk about it very much. There's nothing wrong, with not knowing the answers yourself, right? This type of reading and text, you can tell your student is not something you do on, this may not be what you do for fun. That's fine. It's not really what I do for fun either. I find poems really interesting when I get into them. But the challenge for me is getting into them. And so I tend not to read them. When I start reading them, I do enjoy them. So, the theme of a poem, hey, I've been teaching this stuff for years. I still have difficulty figuring out what the theme of a poem is, because there are so many possible things that the theme could be, right? In this case, there is really only one that makes sense. But if it doesn't make sense to you, that's fine to have a conversation about with your student. Answers that are given by textbooks are not always accurate, and they don't always agree with what other specialists would say. So, okay, this is what the answer key looks like. It again gives you the standard, and it bolds the answer that is correct. So they say the theme of this poem is people can never fully erase where they come from. Seems fairly reasonable to me. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at some of the additional content that's available with this particular text. We're going to first look at paired, so I'm not sure that all texts have paired text and related media. This one does, but I'm pretty sure that some that I've looked at have not had other things related to them. That may be something that they're building out as they continue to work on the site. So just be aware of that. If we click on paired text for this particular one, we get 3 choices. You can see that the first one is at a lower grade level. So if that poem turns out to be too difficult for your student, you might want to go back and read something at a lower level, but on the same topic. It gives you both the access to this by just clicking on it, as well as a little bit of information about what the text is. All 3 of these are related, they say, based on similar themes, and they tell you what the themes are. And they tell you what type of reading it is: a memoir, general fiction, a short story. So that also gives you some idea of how much time it's going to take to read the text. If we look at related media, we get, for this one, 3 video clips. I happened to click into this one and thought, oh, this is a book I really want to read based on what I heard them talking about here. So all of these are different lengths. You can pick one, you can assign them all, you can do them with your student. They're just going to add to the richness of what you're able to talk about with your student. It helps them access things that they already know in different ways. This is some of what we were talking about in the plenary session about finding ways to help them connect what they already know to new material. The poem may be difficult, but listening or watching this about the Dominican Republic may not be as difficult. So you might get into it that way. Start with the media and then read the poem. Lots and lots of different ways you can access this. So the simplest way to share is, if you're doing this together, is with the student preview. If you want to give your students access on their own device, you can use the share button that's here. And this is what happens. You get an email blank that you can then fill out, type the address of your student. When they get it, they can click here and they will have access to that text without signing in. I've tried it a couple of times. I think it works. I'm not 100% sure, but my tutor tells me it works, and I trust her in most things. So we'll say it works. Let me know if it doesn't work for you, and we'll try something else. If you're together, the simplest way is really the student preview. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go out. If I can figure it out, I can. I know how to do this. And we're going to look at the website itself. Okay. And at this point, if anybody has any questions, let's start with those. If there's something you want me to show you again, or if you have a question about something that I said earlier.
I'm just putting my hand up. Can I speak
That's
now?
okay, Megan.
Okay.
I see you.
So, okay. So I have, the books, The Journey to Success, and I have this. And with both of my students, I read a book with them, and I'm just concerned about time balance, moving through the journey to success and using this as well. I like this and I want to use it. How do I balance the two?
So, Megan, whatever you're doing is helping them with their reading comprehension.
Okay.
There is no set amount of time that you need to move through the textbooks. The textbooks aren't, I mean, anybody using those textbooks knows they are what they are. They're very much like the way that students were taught in school. That makes them boring. Let's be frank, they're boring, right? But they give you a lot of things that you need, that they need to be able to do if they're going to go on in education. Now, if all they're doing is they want to get their high school diploma, get out of this and go do something else, maybe they don't need to practice all those writing skills. There definitely are writing skills that everybody needs, right? But those may not be what's showing up in the textbook. So,
okay.
When we test them the next time, we'll look at the book you've got and decide if we should continue in that series. If, hopefully they will have made enough of a gain that we will say, no, we're not, we're going to move on now to studying for the GED, which is a different set of materials. Okay. Does that help?
It does. Very much so.
I think personally, I would really go with what interests your students.
Okay.
That's my first thing. What do they want to do? And what will they keep reading when you aren't there? If you can find that thing that your student will read when you leave the room, you've started them, right?
Okay.
And that can be a real challenge, which is why these shorter things, these shorter articles may really be helpful, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Anybody else with a question?
Lisa, I'm left a minute, so I may have missed something, but the PDF feature, does that include the interactive elements? And can
it does not. What it does is it writes Q1, and then I think it's either off to the side or down below. You'll get the question, but you can't interact with it, right? So if you print it, you would be doing the interaction, right?
I see. You can download the PDF and then use it yourself, right?
You could, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if all you're going to do is have them read and discuss it with you, the PDF is fine.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at browsing. This is what comes up today. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is how they're building out the Spanish language portion of it. And I want to just remind everybody that if they are reading in their native language and not in English, it's still helping them with reading. It's not helping them with English, right? But it's helping them with reading. So for our Spanish speakers, there's nothing wrong with asking them to read, one of these other things at a higher level than they can read in English, and then ask them to come back and tell you about it, right? Because that's still going to cross the language barrier and help improve their English. Okay, so we get little pieces of information about each of these. These are the newest texts on Common Lit up at the top. Then we've got, must be Hispanic Heritage Month. It's November, so that may very well be the case. So these are the elementary texts. So these are the lower level ones, 3rd through maybe 5th. And then the secondary ones, so maybe it's 3rd through 6th and 7th through 12th. And then some back-to-back school texts for middle school, back-to-school texts. So so you can see they're organized in different ways, right? That's how I found the story that I was sharing with you. But you can start by looking at grade levels. So this is an original, a Common Lit original. Many of these are adapted stories, and you'll find things in here that you probably read before at certain levels. So this gives you an overview. This is a fairly lengthy story, 4 pages PDF. Tells you about the setting, the plot, and some teaching tips over here. So I would read all of this before I decide if I want to possibly use it with somebody. And then I would also read the story. This is a long story. So if your reader is weak, maybe this is something you read aloud. If you're not confident that they're a 3rd grade reader, they may still understand it if you read it to them. Let's see. And you'll notice, oh, this does have paired texts. Oh yeah, Lost in a Corn Maze. So this is also a 3rd grade. I looked at this one and thought, this one might be doable with a really low level student because it's very short. It has some words that are very culturally related to the US and Halloween, Frankenstein, sunken, pumpkin, zombie. So this might be something you could do even with someone who doesn't read at this particular level. The interesting thing about poems is that they are more accessible to non-native English speakers than you might think. Because the amount of language in them is often less. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you pick articles that a student has personal information about, it's going to make it more interesting for them to read rather than less. I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, Keith.
You said the minimum reading level for this is 3rd grade.
Mhm.
Has anybody been able to equate like 3rd grade reading level to the Standout series? Because I've only ever used mostly the Standout series since I've been tutoring.
There is a correlation. I don't have it at my fingertips, Keith. If you email Katie, she will be able to tell you, but it isn't exact, right? If your student can read the text and stand out, then it's likely to be good, right? But if they're struggling with the standout text itself, but the conversation is fine, knowing the level of the standout text won't help you. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yes, they can tell you what the reading level of standout is, for
Okay.
sure.
Good.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Lisa, just a
Yeah.
comment that might help Keith. My student is at a beginning intermediate level, and we
Right.
also use the standout series, and we're at the very beginning of level 3 in standout.
Okay.
And when I use Common Lit, a lot of times we're working at around a 4th or 5th grade level.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
mainly for, because of the length of the text and vocabulary. She's a
Right.
college educated student, but just the level of the text and then, the vocabulary, I find around a 5th grade level, a lot of those
Right.
articles and stuff appropriate. If it's a little bit longer, we'll like take turns. We read aloud and we'll take turns. She does one paragraph, I do a paragraph, and things like that.
Yeah. I'm in favor of making it accessible to them at this point, right? So if that means using a lower level, there's no problem with that as long as they're interested in it. And as you can see, I mean, there's really a wide variety of material here that you can choose. So if they like science, read science. If they like history, read history. If they really hate fiction, and that's something that adults seem to have real feelings about. If they hate fiction, don't make them read fiction a whole lot, unless, they're, like I said, if they're going to go on to college, maybe they need that, right? Anything else? I think the next section, and I had it pulled up and now I don't know where it is. Let's see. Aha. The next section starts at 11:10. We can keep talking for 10 minutes. If there's other stuff you want to talk about, Miguel and I are both here. Miguel,
I have a,
yeah, go ahead, Megan.
so with my one student, and I don't mean to make this all about me and my student,
No.
but with my one student, we're reading The Boy with the Striped Pajamas. So I could almost do a thematic unit incorporating, and I think you and I discussed this earlier,
Yeah.
but incorporating different things like main idea and
Yeah,
all that
what
other
was,
stuff.
is that I should know that book, Megan, I don't.
Oh, it's okay. It's a book about a little boy it takes place during World War II, and his father is in the German army, and they move.
I was
And
thinking
his,
it was something, so
yeah,
you could look up, World War II,
yeah,
find, different takes on that same period of time. You said that she's really interested in it. And
yes,
so
yeah,
I think that's a great way to hook her. And I think the other thing is once she learns more about World War II in Germany, then she's going to have questions about World War II and the impact in the United States. And then she's going to, it starts opening up these other things to her. But she needs, and you've got it, The Boy with Striped Pajamas, she's hooked.
yeah.
Right. So yes, I would work out from that for sure.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm still doing some phonics with her. Okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
And you need to keep bouncing back to some of the phonics, right?
Okay.
If she isn't comfortable, she's not comfortable, but you can read with her at a higher level than she can read on her own. That's the other thing to keep in mind for everybody. You can, if you're supporting them, they can read more difficult material.
Okay.
I think back, honestly, as I started this today, I thought about my mother reading the Little House books to me when I was in, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade. At that point, I was not reading independently. She was reading those books to me aloud. And she got called away to the telephone. And she didn't come back. And I got tired of waiting for her, and I just started reading the books.
Hmm.
And she was a little miffed that I'd gone ahead and read without her. So she didn't finish that book till my sister came along, was at that stage. But you know, that's the sort of thing that it takes, is,
Yeah,
you know, and that's our goal, right? Is to give them something right at that. So I was right at the level where I understood most of what she was reading. I could read most of the words she was reading. There were, you know, there are some really specific words in the Little House books that are specific to agriculture or living in a log cabin or living at that stage in time. And I, by then, had figured out that I didn't have to know what every single word meant in order to get the story, right?
yeah.
So, anyway, any other questions? Anything else you want to talk about?
So,
Yeah,
yeah, can you say more about you mentioned a translate function.
sure.
Is that just Spanish English, or is that?
I don't know. Let's go take a look.
Yeah.
I'm no longer
My
sharing.
student, her first language is Arabic, and sometimes she'll be looking up a word on her phone, when we're talking
Right.
about something that she doesn't understand. But I wondered how extensive
Yeah,
the
yeah, so I want to go to, all right,
and
I'm
where
gonna go
that
back.
is, how you
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
I'll show you. I'm gonna go
Okay.
back to the library and pick a third grade.
Hmm.
Let's try the corn maze. So if we click on translate,
Oh, where
we've
is
got a long list.
Oh, where is where do you click translate?
Okay, so can you see my screen? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back. Just want to get it. So the translate is right here.
Oh, and
above activity.
That's not the student preview. That's
This is the student preview now.
Oh, the student preview. Okay.
You can do it on the student, but you can do it on yours as well.
Okay.
Okay. So when you click translate, then you've got a chance to select the language that you want. And Arabic is right there.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. So
now
what
I don't know. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Over here, right?
Okay.
You'd click on this and the translation comes up over here.
Oh, that's the translation for which
Of this
section?
sentence, of that sentence.
Oh.
Okay. So you would be doing it
Oh my gosh.
section,
Wow.
paragraph by paragraph.
Wow. Not
Okay.
word by word. So
Not
okay.
word by word.
I see.
So because word by word translation never works, Lucy.
Mhm.
It just
Okay.
never works. Miguel, as a bilingual speaker, you can speak to that better than I can. We want the ideas to translate, not the words.
Okay.
Which is why I would first have her be reading in English at a level that she can read
Oh
at.
yeah. Right.
And then,
Mhm.
if there's an issue with something, translate that segment.
That segment. Sometimes it is a word, or a
Absolutely.
concept.
Absolutely.
But then it would show up in that paragraph.
It would be in there. Yeah.
Interesting.
I
That's
think
amazing.
if it's only single words, Lucy, using her dictionary is fine.
Yeah.
It's if it's an idea. So one of
Right.
my questions was, let's see if we've got it translated. Oh my goodness. Look at this. It will translate the questions and answers.
All right. Wow.
So again, something I didn't know
That's amazing.
might be useful from time to time.
Yeah, from time to time. Of course, you want them to do it in English, but
As much
if
as
they get
possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
great.
because the goal is to be able to do this in English.
Right.
Basically. But knowing that this support is here might give them the courage to try things that otherwise they would be afraid to try.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Or a poem. I could sort of see
Poems are
a
great.
short poem, because sometimes she has trouble with abstract